guessing we might still have a couple stragglers. Oh, hello. Are you on?
Yes,
Okay.
testing.
So it's a little overkill using the microphones, except that we're recording it, and so the microphones are for the recording to pick it up clearly. But I think what we'll do is, while we have people still coming in, we have a couple of folks that are here that were missed last week. And so I gave you guys some notes, but let me just, let us just really quickly tell you a couple of, or kind of walk through a few of those things, kind of highlights of it, just so we can give you an idea. And it'll be good for everyone else, just as a quick review of sort of where we are. So last week we talked about, why foundations of parenting, and that's those first four things you see there: faith versus formula. We really try to step away from the idea of a formula to parent by, and rather, what does it look like to have a faithful journey as parents? Number two is we want to raise followers of Christ above and beyond, kind of all those other things. Like we all hope our child does really well in school and, has a successful career, but ultimately we want to be followers of Christ. Number three is we believe parents are the first and best disciplers of their own children, which is a theme you hear at Lake City a lot. And then that fourth is this framework for parenting, which is kind of this parenting path.
Yeah, which is just comprised of four things that we want you to remember that are just always, we want them to always be kind of you thinking about. Even as we talk today, we're going to keep referring to this parenting path. And that parenting path consists of really having your own faith as a priority with the Lord, because that just impacts so much of who we are, everything about who we are, not only personally, but in our marriages and in our parenting. And then our marriage health is important, because we just say you can't really separate your marriage from your parenting. Those two kind of go together. And then parenting IQ, just meaning how much have you heard about parenting, or what is a biblical view of parenting, or what do you think about when you hear the word parenting and the biggest influence on you as parents. And then the last one is rhythm of life, and that just talks about, if you've ever seen that balance wheel, all the things that we're trying to get done in this life we live, and how we go about getting the important things done in our lives.
And so just picture that parenting path as these four things are always at play in that parenting path. And so, we're always kind of taking a mental assessment of, how's my faith journey doing? How's my marriage doing? How's my parenting? Am I growing in my parenting? And what does our rhythm of life look like? And that way, like, as you realize, you're needing some work in one area, then you can put a little more focus in that area. So that's the idea of that parenting path. And then we really introduce what these 3 weeks here are about. The 3 most important things to teach your child. So last week we started with to love God. This week we're going to talk about obeying you as the parent. And then next week is going to be about self-control. So, and we didn't talk about those 3. We just really introduced that that's where we're going to go. And then finally, we just talked about the first most important thing, which is to love God, meaning we want to teach our kids to love God, but one of the points that we make is that we all know is we can't make our kids love God, right? But we can create an environment, salt the oats, do the things that can, help them grow up to, again, that desire that one day they would fall down on their knees and say yes to Jesus, right? And so you can see it spells out faith. And so, again, we do this very quickly, but fear the Lord, authority. We talk about the importance of letting them understand, biblical authority. Authority is God-given. We're an authority in their life, not because we're special, but because God's put us there. The I is intentional. We need to be intentional in how we talk about faith and introduce faith. Truth, we want to teach our kids truth. In a sec, we'll go to the ages and life stages, but in that truth section, it's that how do we let them know that there is a right and a wrong, there is things are true biblically for sure. And then finally, that ultimately we're after their heart, right? And so I know that doesn't tell you everything about it, but just a quick kind of summary of that. And then the last thing is
the ages and life stages. And again, I love this, and we'll refer back to this again based on this verse. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord, meaning we start out training by act and we move into training by word, as you can see on the vertical side there, and on the horizontal. We've just divided our parenting into 4 different stages loosely, and that our parenting changes as our kids change, because you don't discipline your kids the same at 6 as you do at 16. A little bit of difference there in their stage of development.
Yeah, so this class is really focused more on that director and trainer phase, although, again, we'll refer to this because there's aspects of what we're talking about that cross all of the ages and life stages. And then on the back, there's a chart with some of the developmental stages that, you can, helps you just kind of have a sense of what those might be. So that was last week, and that's, that was what we did to kick off our class. This week, we are now going to move into the second most important thing to teach your child. Let me get to it. And that is to obey you, the parent. What's that? Oh, yeah. Thank you. You want to go ahead?
Yeah. Lord Jesus, just thank you for this evening. Thank you for this time that we can carve out in busy lives of raising these wonderful children to just talk about you and the way you parent us and how that translates to us parenting these gifts that you've given us. So thank you for this time. I pray over these homes and these families that are sitting here, and I pray that you would just speak through us, Lord, the things that you want us to hear tonight. We love you and just ask all this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. So once again, we're on the second most important thing, and it is to obey you. If you go
This
back,
is when all the parents cheer, usually in the audience.
if you go back to last week, the first most important thing, the great commandment, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So it's pretty natural that what would follow from that is that that's the most important thing that we would teach our child, and so, or want our child to also do, is follow in that. And that's why last week was all about, what does it look like to, raise kids that follow the Lord. And let me say this, because this is important. We're further down the road than all of you, right? Yes, all of you, and when it comes to the parenting piece and the ages of our kids. And so, we are in that place of, we have adult kids, and the crazy thing is when, your kids, I know some of you have littles. Believe it or not, someday they're going to be adults, and they make their own decisions, and they actually make them even if we don't agree with them. Kind of weird, but they do that. But the reason I say that is because when it comes to their faith journey, at the end of the day, like, their faith journey is their faith journey, right? And we would love to dictate what's going to happen, but it's their faith journey. And probably more to the case is it's between them and the Lord. You guys, there's a couple seats up here.
And while we're on just a little bit of a commercial, that wasn't a commercial, that's foundational. But the other 2 things I wanted to say is we have a lot more stuff that goes under all of these, but since we only have an hour, we just pulled our favorite stuff to share with you, because when we go to churches, we spend, Friday night and all day Saturday talking about all this, which is why we talk fast, because I want you to have all of it, but we can't get it all out in an hour. And then the other thing is that I need you to just remember is we didn't start out sounding like this or knowing all this stuff. We started out just like y'all, thinking, what am I going to teach this kid? And I'm responsible for all of this. And so we've learned along the way. Remember, we're not experts, we're just experienced, and we want you to have any resources and any of our mistakes and what we learned from those as we share tonight.
And so we introduced ourselves last week. I just realized that some of you were not here last week. And we know a lot of you anyhow, but just in case. So David and Kelly Pritchard, I'm on staff here at Lake City. I'm one of the pastors here, and currently I'm the campus pastor down in Lacey. But I've been overseeing, I've been the family ministries pastor at Lake City for 15 years. And then prior to that, we had a national role with Young Life as family. I mean, basically, we're the family ministries pastors for the mission. And so this is kind of in the middle of our sweet spot of what we love and are passionate about. And so it's always a joy for us to get to do this. But we have 11 kids, 8 biological, and then we adopted 3. We just had our 19th grandchild. And so we tell you that because just so you know, we love kids, and we're so grateful that you all are having kids. And like we told these guys, families like the Lewises, they need to have more kids. You guys need to have lots of kids. We love kids. But so thanks for being here. We're really glad that you guys are here. But we are going to jump into the second most important thing to teach our child, and that is to obey you. All right? So the verse, let me flip this. Go ahead.
The verse is children. Notice who the verse is to. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And I always ask parents, do you want it to go well for your kids? Do you want them to live a long life? Yes.
And as Kelly said, it's children obey your parents. So this isn't actually a mandate to parents. We often say this is one of the few very direct mandates in Scripture about parenting, but it's really to the children, right? But one of my favorite quotes is, because I coached for many, many years, a coach's job is to get young men to do things they don't want to do in order to accomplish all that they ever dreamed of accomplishing. So from a biblical standpoint, I look at this and I say, yeah, our job is to get kids do what they don't want to do, which is obey us, so that they can accomplish all that God has intended for them. Does that make sense? All right. So what does the word mean? The word obey, if you look it up in the dictionary, means to follow commands, rules, or instructions from a person or authority. If you look it up in the Bible dictionary, it says to submit to authority. Interesting, because we're going to talk more about that concept. But in this cultural moment that we are in, the word obey is more than just 4 letters. It is a 4-letter word, because it speaks of something very commanding and direct, and so depending on who you're talking to, it can raise emotions. It can raise some red flags for people, and so we want to just acknowledge that first and foremost, and we'll talk just briefly about that.
Yeah, so before COVID hit, just because of the cultural moment that we're living in, we weren't getting a lot of calls to talk about getting your kids to obey or disciplining your kids. I thought, wow, this is super interesting. And then COVID hit, and parents were with their children 24/7, not going to school, in their homes. And after COVID, guess what? Parents started saying, okay, Pritchards, can you do that parenting stuff again about obeying and discipline? And we said, yeah. So it was a turning point. COVID was actually good for our parenting gigs because people wanted to start thinking about this. And somehow obedience has gotten a really bad rap right now in our culture.
Yeah, and so we just want to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge, because in the current culture, there is oftentimes a culture of disrespect. We just got a call today from a parent whose child is super disrespectful, and they're asking questions about what do I do about that. And it is it's always been there. Like, that's not anything new. There's nothing new under the sun. You know, you go to any generation and there's been disrespect between child and parent, but we definitely have a culture of disrespect right now. And so when we bring all that up, just to acknowledge that as we step into a conversation about obeying, it may drum up or trigger a lot of different things. Even saying that word trigger, I mean, there's language things that we hear now about, being a safe place and words that are triggering, and so all of a sudden it can cause us. Here's the primary reason we're even bringing it up is it can make it hard for you to actually parent this particular piece that we're telling you to parent. And that's why we always come back to God's truth, God's word, right? Children, obey your parents. Like, that is not my idea. That's not like this, clever thought. Like, that's God's idea, is that children will obey their parents. And so our job is to do the things that we can to encourage that in our children, even though it may be culturally looked at differently than we want it to be looked at. Okay, so with all of that as kind of just a setup for it, we're going to just talk about some of the things that we do to train this. We're going to talk about disciplining here in a bit, but we're going to first talk about, like, how do we train obedience in our kids?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we had 8 kids in about 15 and a half years. In fact, my oldest daughter, who was 15 and a half at the time, actually delivered my 8th baby, which is a whole fun story, which I don't get to tell because I don't have time. But with that many kids, it was important that I wasn't having to say things 20 times to get any movement with any person in that house. So we just came up with a thing that we wanted to say, I need you to obey the first time. When I say your name, I need you to say, yes, Mom, and then do whatever it is I'm asking you to do, which was not groundbreaking to me because it was more like survival until I was at the pool one time and I had everybody in the pool and my 12-year-old daughter was in the pool and my 3-year-old was in the pool. And the 3-year-old had to go potty, and I said, Jordan, would you please take Kayla potty? And she said, yes, Mom, and jumped up and took Jordan potty. And I had a mom come over and say, how did you do that? And I had literally no idea what she was talking about. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking me. So, and that is actually how we ended up here, as a group of parents just said, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, and so, the common question when you say we want to train our kids first time obedience is, well, how do you do that? I can't get my kid to do it the first time, and my thing is, you're going to eventually get them to do it, right? And so we say, whatever you were going to do the 5th time to get them to do it, you do it the first time, right? And and we say that and people laugh and like, oh great, so we're going to escalate this thing every time. It's like, no. And here's one thing I want you to hear that would run through everything we teach, and that is the kids are the easy part. It's us as the parents that are the hard part. Like, you are going to be the hard ones to convince. You're going to be the hard ones to get out of habits. Your kids will follow suit. Like, if you change, they'll change. Okay. So I mean, like, the easiest example I use is, Johnny's at home and he's playing video games, right? And then you walk in the door, and you notice Johnny's dropped his backpack, he's dropped his coat, and he's in front of the TV, and you say, Johnny, please pick up your backpack, hang up your coat. Johnny, pick up your backpack, pick up your coat. Johnny, pick up your Johnny, okay, if I have to come over there, I'm going to count to 3, and then, the whole time Johnny's just, right? And then, all of a sudden you stand up, and now Johnny's like, and then you take a step to him, and then Johnny...
Not your kids. This would be our kids we're telling on, okay?
And then you take a step towards Johnny, and he jumps up, and he goes and does whatever it is that you are asking, right? And so all we're saying is, instead of the other 4 or 5 times, because what have you just trained him to do? We just trained him to ignore the first 4. If you stand up, start paying attention, and then as soon as you take a step towards him, now go do whatever it is. And so we would just say, like, break those habits and, because again, who's the easy ones in this? The kids, right? If they know that when mom asks me to do it, she expects me to do it. If dad asks me to do it, he expects me to do it, okay?
And again, that comes with a conversation depending on age and development and all of that stuff. We're not saying, you don't flip this on them without some good conversation, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. We also wanted to train to a calm and gentle voice. I didn't want to have to be raising the volume and being a crazy person, although...
Which is even more reason to do it the first time instead of the fifth time.
Yeah.
Because by the fifth time, you're ticked, they're, whatever, and it doesn't go well.
So it's on me to train them to asking nicely, again, without having to yell to get what I need to have happen.
Yeah, and the next one is to make it fun. And Kelly was great at this. If the playroom was a mess, she'd put a basket in the middle of the floor and okay, let's have a contest. How quickly can we get this clean, or who can get the most things in the basket? So, as much as possible, she would try to, make it a game. Even teaching them to listen to her voice, playing stop, go, she'd just, I would see her just playing with the kids, when I say go, you go. When I say stop, you stop. Again, just getting them to practice to listen to my voice the first time, right?
Yeah, because people think, oh, this sounds like drudgery. And actually, kids really learn fast and well when you're playing games with them.
Yeah.
And the next one is catching them doing things right. Anytime any of my kids did something without being asked, I would just go crazy. I can't believe you would get your brother's shoes on. I didn't even have to ask you. We're going out. We need shoes and coats, and you did that without even asking. Wow, you're amazing, and that feels so loving. I know I can count on you. So I go pretty crazy over that.
And then the last one there is related to that one, but it's talk about what you want. I use a lot of coaching analogies or examples, but when you're coaching, if I was a lineman and I'm trying to teach a center how to snap the ball, and if I'm not careful, I can find myself saying, yeah, don't put your hand there, and don't put your hand there, and don't hold it like that. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to not do something, or I could tell him the one way I want him to do it, right? Put your hand here. Here's what I want you to do. And same with our kids. It's too easy. We fell into it a lot. Yeah, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And instead, trying to get in the habit of telling them what we want them to do, right?
The bathtub is a great example because kids are in the bathtub splashing water all over the floor. What I used to do is go and say, stop splashing water all over. So what did they picture in their mind? Splashing water all over. So I said, okay, guys, let's keep the water in the tub. When parents don't want their kids to run, what do they usually say? Stop. Yeah, so that's what they're picturing. So we say, please walk in the house, walk inside, run outside. Walk inside, run outside. And so it's a fun game. I mean, it flipped our parenting for sure, and we helped each other because we found ourselves saying things that we didn't want them to do rather than saying, okay, here's what I want you to do.
Yeah, so there's other stuff, but these are just a few that we pulled out that are highlights from this. And then adding to that are some things that we would say very much to the parents. Some of these are similar, a similar feel to them, but these are ones that we would say we talk to parents about often. And the first one is just that we want to parent out of one flesh. And you're going to hear us say this again, but when number one, we do better when we are doing this together, okay? And I can just tell you right now, there were plenty of times in our marriage where we weren't doing things together because we were mad at each other, things weren't going well, and so we took it out on each other. And I can just tell you, far and away, things just worked better when we did them together, okay? So that's first. But biblically, we are called to be one flesh, all right? And here's the thing, that was God's idea, that wasn't ours. So it's not just a matter of, we've seen it work better, there's this practicality to it, although that exists, but there's also this spiritual reality to that we're called into one flesh. And what we've learned over the years, just because we've been at it for so long, is that, God has used our wiring with each other to make our parenting better. He's also used as we've one fleshed our parenting, he's used our parenting to also grow us. Like I am who I am today because of the way God has used this woman in my life. And not just in abstract things, but in parenting. Like not just watching her parent, but as we've had to come up with, solutions to things as the kids are, I can remember walking through the door and her saying, you need to have a conversation with number 2. And, and I'm like, early on, I would be like, I would take it like she's getting on me about something and I hadn't even done anything. Later, I learned like to trust her instincts in that. Number one, just because she's had more time with the kids, because, I was the one gone more than she was. And so what happened was I became I parented better, but I also became a better man, godly man, because of the way that God used her in our parenting.
Yeah, I would say, and we're not talking about roles here, because just to be a role buster, and I still feel really envious of this, but David was the French braider of the girls' hair, which blew all the mothers away. They couldn't stand it because he would French braid the whole row of the fast pitch girls team because he was just a master hair braider. But I will say that mothers in general want to protect. We're the mama bears. Men, on the other hand, bless their souls, want to prepare our children to launch well. Sometimes those things come into conflict with each other. And the third thing I will say just really quick about this one fleshing is, because I hear women maybe occasionally say, well, he doesn't know anything about this, like breastfeeding, for example, or sleep training or whatever. And I have found that this man is a well of wisdom, and he doesn't have to breastfeed to give me some interesting insight on feeding or sleeping or discipline. So I just want to say to both sets of parents, don't miss the gold that you have right next to you in your house as you're co-parenting, because when I am not very strong in my parenting, this guy comes in strong. When he's like, oh, just let him go ahead, I'm like, oh no, you don't know what I've been through today. We are not letting this go.
The next thing for you guys is family meetings. Kelly mentioned earlier that we don't want you to run home after this and just start,
Johnny, with the video game.
Yeah, you don't want to start throwing these things out, and just start implementing them. We always say we're going to start things with a family meeting. Now, obviously, if they're little infants, that's a different story. We're just talking about like language, and in fact, we'll try to do a better job of also adding some of the language that we use, because Kelly was a master when kids were little. You start, even though she doesn't understand everything you're saying, you start saying the words. You start practicing saying the words, and then it starts to grow as they start to grow. So we'll try to make sure we insert those. But family meetings, especially as your kids start to enter into that the training phase, where now you're trying to load them up, load up their spiritual warehouse. You're trying to teach them right and wrong. We did family meetings on a regular basis, and what the family meeting did for us was it was a chance for us to pause. As a family, do a check-in. How are we doing, as a family?
Or as parents. We
Or
let
as
them rate
parents.
us. Yeah.
They always had opinions about that. And then it was a chance, if there was something that we needed to communicate, that was broken, or we learned, they taught us that we also needed to make sure we shared with them the things that were going really well. Because, there's times where there's some things going really well. But a family meeting would be the time, for instance, in this, for anything that you came out of something like this with, or if you read a great book, family meeting would be the time to bring up something there about that. Like, hey, we just went to this thing, and they talked about this. If they talked about first-time obedience, we'd love to have a conversation about that. So you introduce it in a time where they get to ask some questions about it. Like, why do we need to do that? And and then you get to say, well, here's what God's word says. That kind of a thing. So family meetings have been a great, and we do have a handout for that we can try to get to.
If you want it. Your kids are mostly young right now, but it's just a good thing to start thinking about. And you can have a family meeting with your partner right now because you are a family. Remember, you've welcomed a child into this family, but this is a family meeting can start when the kids are really early to talk about.
But we did start them once our kids got into school.
Yeah.
So once they got into school, that's when we really started our family meetings.
The next one is Sparks. And we have a lot of things that we...
So, true confession, we used to call these triggers, and then we learned, let's change the name.
The cultural moment.
We're calling them Sparks.
Yeah. And it just means we needed a little phrase to remind our kids of the teaching that they have heard maybe a bazillion times. Could you pull those up for me, please? Do you have them? And they were really great because, especially with our boys, now again, your boys are probably...
So these are, you have them on the back last sheet and a half, I think, or something like that.
For example, like we would say things like be a good finder and a good finder, meaning finding the good in others and also developing the skill of seeing what needs to be done. And so we would not have to give a lecture over, would you please stop walking over the trash that's overflowing onto the kitchen floor? That's your job this week, so could you go ahead and take it out? We wanted them to be aware of what needs to be done. Or when we would leave our kids in the care of anyone, grandma, Sunday school, Awana, coach, we would say, make it easy on the person in charge. Meaning, I don't have to go through the whole list. You know what it means to make it easy on the person in charge. So we've collected these. We'll be happy to take any that you have, but they're just quick ways to spark that talk that we've had many times in our family meeting.
The illustration I always use, or I often use, is Psalm 22 begins with, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where else do we hear that phrase? Jesus on the cross, right? And, most scholars believe that when he said that, the Jews that were standing there would have heard Psalm 22. And if you read Psalm 22, it's this beautiful psalm of the Savior on the cross. And so in a similar way, like we want to teach our kids the lecture or the sermon, and then, all we need to do is say the phrase, the trigger, the spark, and it reminds them, oh, that's right. I know what that means. Okay?
So the next one is role playing, and we do this in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes when someone needs a consequence, I'll say, okay, so you're the mom and dad, and I'm the kid, and I just did what you did. What do you think should happen? And they're like, I don't know. And I said, okay, but this is really important. I mean, what you did was not the best choice. This is a learning experience. What do you think you need to do to help you remember what to do the next time? It's super interesting to ask kids. Also, role-playing during this training phase when you're dumping into their moral warehouse. You get to say things like, because your kids are in 5th grade, and you get to say, hey, your friend wants to copy your test. What are you going to say? You think that's right or wrong? Or your friend wants to go in and just take some candy in the store. I mean, those are all good things to role play through.
And to give language.
And to give good language for. So those are all good ways to do that in a safe place, to share some of the times that we've made bad choices and what happened to us. Again, age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, but role playing is an easy way to do some really good teaching.
Yeah, and then the last one is just repetition, and all we mean there is just, and this is something but we just remind you, like, a lot of this stuff, you're just going to be at it for a long time, and that, they need to hear it over and over and over again, right? Okay.
Wait, can I tell one more about a spark? My all-time favorite spark is when I ask someone to do something. Like one day, my son, who by the time he left, was taller than me. And I asked him to do something, and he copped an attitude. And I said, "You want to try that again?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." I mean, I said that very quietly, respectfully. And he said, "Oh, yeah, Mom, sorry." Well, then the next day, my daughter came in, and same thing happened. And I said, "You want to try that again?" And she started crying and said, "You don't know what happened today." And I stepped back and I thought, "You're right. I don't know what happened. Why don't you go do what I ask you to do, please, and then come back and I'll make us chai tea and you can tell me all about it." So again, it was just it's a good, try again, please. It just gives them one chance to kind of become aware of what they're doing or their attitude. Sometimes they say that to me occasionally when they got older, but
That's one, by the way, our kids to this day use a lot and reference a lot, is, "You want to try that again, please?" All right, so not an exhaustive list, just kind of some quick hits of how we navigate this, and then some quick hits for you parents in terms of like little tools for you. Any questions before we kind of keep going there? Yes.
yeah. So how old is she? Yeah, 3-year-olds. I love 3-year-olds.
And
So
the question is, how do you do?
yeah. And so
fir-
first time obedience. How do you train first time obedience? And you, with a 3-year-old, you make it fun. You, like I said, we play stop and go. Do you know that game where you say go, and when I call your name, you freeze and turn and say yes, Mom? I mean, that's a game that I played over and over when everybody was happy and we are fed and we've had enough sleep. We played in the house. We played outside the house. But sometimes I try to do that training again when everybody's happy and fed and not sleepy, because the time that you're sitting in the pew at the church on Sunday is not the time to train your children. You want to train them away from that, but in your home, like for example, if you ask your daughter to do something, she ignores you. Sometimes when you're starting the training, I will say, "We're going to play a new game, and when Mommy says your name, I want you to stop and say, 'Yes, Mom.'" And that's all you do for the first part. And you make it a really fun game. And a fun game means you don't give them food necessarily, but you'll say, "And then we'll read a book, or we'll go outside, or we'll play a game." So you're trying to reinforce, "I'm going to call your name," and you say, "Yes, Mom." You turn and look at me and say, "Yes, Mom." And that's all you do. And then you add one step. You say, "Now I'm going to say your name," and you're going to say, "Yes, Mom." And then I'm going to give you a mission. So the mission is going to be, please go get, you have another baby, right? A boy? A girl. "I want you to go get Sissy's pacifier and bring it to Mommy." So she doesn't need the pacifier, but you're just finding something, a mission for her to go on. And then you come back with the pacifier. So you add that step to the game. So you do step by step, and you go crazy when she stops, freezes, looks at you and says, "Yes, Mom." Okay?
Now, the other thing I would add to that is, and this goes back to the ages and life stages, that sheet, the blue sheet. If you weren't here last week, we have the sheets from last week for some of you. Did you get one?
Yeah, we'll get you.
Yeah, you want to give her, it should be that. Yeah, so the blue sheet there, if you look at that, because this is also important, the idea with that ages and life stages is that, as our kids get older, or let's start it the other way, when they're younger, we are training by act. In other words, we're going to, be helping them in their training. As they get older, we start moving more and more to training by word, right? And so with a 3-year-old, we don't want to sit there and have a debate with your 3-year-old. We don't want to ask them, philosophical questions about why they're being mean to their sissy like that. We just want to get them to obey. So in real time, like games are important to because they help train in a friendly, happy environment. But in real time, you ask her to do something and she isn't doing it on the first time, then you walk over. So that's the training by act. You walk over and say, Mom said to come, right now, and you just help her along because she's small enough that you can actually guide her, right?
And you're not mad. You're getting what you want. And she might, react a little bit, but you say, oh, Mama said we're going to come and eat now to dinner. Dinner time is another great training place. We start out saying you need to stay in your high chair, 10 minutes and eat your food, and then I let them down. But gradually, we have them stay a little bit longer to show Daddy a picture that they drew or to say something good that happened. So the dinner table is a great place to train. Again, it's away from the public, and a story time is a great time to train, that we're going to sit for 2 minutes. And you got Alexa, so she does the timer. You say, I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and I want you to stay right here while we read the story. So you're doing your step by step building this obedience into them.
And I'll come back to what I said. The kids are the easy part. It's us. We get and this isn't a blanket statement. I mean, there are exceptions to all of this, but generally speaking, we get lazy, right? It's just easier to keep droning on and asking them over and over again. And when we learn to ask the first time and they don't do it, and then we move so that they. But it does mean then we have to get up and walk over to them. But if we will model for them what we're asking, if we, in the case of Johnny who won't pick up his backpack, if you ask him the first time and he doesn't do it, and then you walk over out right after that and you shut off the video games, he learns like, oh, the next time I better listen when Mom asks me to, go pick up my backpack. Okay. Good? All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? And we'll talk a little bit more about this because our next section is 5 C's of discipline. So we're going to talk about like some discipline things in case there's some specific questions about that. Yes?
You might get to this then, but so we have a 7, going to be 8-year-old in January. So, and we didn't do a good job at that when she was 3. So I guess what advice do you have for us? Like, should we go back to playing those games as well and just kind of start fresh?
Yep.
And have a little family meeting and chat about it?
Yeah, my most common phrase at the family meetings was, I'm sorry, I blew it, to my kids, to just say, hey, you guys, sorry, Mom and Dad, we've not done a great job with this, and so forgive us, but we want to do better. And so here's some things that we're going to do that are going to be different,
Yeah, and it is in the name of our family working well that we're a team and we need all of you. And the way this works the best is that we listen to each other. I want to listen to you when you need my attention, and I need you to listen to me when I need your attention. And we need you. I mean, we can't make this family work without you. So after the apology, you kind of have an explanation of why you want to. This won't be hard for her. I mean, she'll just need some reminders, but this is for all of you. So we can help we can do lots of fun things. We can get the house clean so we can get to the park and play. I mean, this is about us having a family that works well together.
All right. So we're going to, this next section is just called the 5 C's of discipline. We have the one proverb there, discipline your son, he will give you peace, he will bring delight to your soul. And then, one of the reasons we use this one is that, over the years, we've had this comment made, throughout the years has been, that you just need to love them well. And we would tell you, there is a lot of truth to that. If we love our kids well, they're God's kid. God loves them more than we do. And so there's some real truth to that. If we love our kids well, a lot of things do seem to work out, okay? What we've found oftentimes is it's everyone else that doesn't make it. We see a lot of stress put on this when we're not disciplining our kids. A lot of stress is put on the rest of the family when we're not disciplining our kids. And so,
And the world will discipline your kids.
And the
if
world
you
will
don't.
discipline your kid. But I like this one just because it's a reminder that we want to discipline our kids. Disciplining is not a bad
thing. It's a very biblical principle.
And I want you to enjoy your kids. I mean,
He will
when I
bring
see,
delight to your soul.
yeah, when I see moms that are completely frustrated and not wanting any more kids and not liking kids, I'm just like, my heart's broken because I want you to enjoy your kids. I want you, when they go away from you, to say, hurry back to me, or I had you to be with you. I love being with you. And that is true if you're doing the back work, the groundwork of laying a good foundation.
And then we gave you a bunch of other proverbs about disciplining, and there's tons of things in the Bible, obviously, about disciplining. And the bottom line is, we're all disciplined by the Lord. And we say that at family meetings often. Like, you guys, like, it's not just you guys. God's disciplining us all the time, and we try to put ourselves under people's discipline so that we're growing as well. And then we gave you Hebrews 12 there, just as that reminder that we're all disciplined, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves. And so we won't read that whole thing just in the name of time, but it's a great verse to be reminded of, because again, in this cultural moment, it's easy to be afraid to be parents. Oftentimes when we're called in to counsel with couples around parenting, we often will say, honestly, and in conferences and stuff that we speak at, we'll often say, honestly, the number one thing we're going to do for you today is we're going to give you permission to parent. Because a lot of times parents just need somebody to tell them it's okay for me to parent. It's okay for me to discipline. It's okay for me to do the things that I think I'm supposed to be doing. And we just want to be one of those voices that say, yes, this is what you are called to do. So let's define discipline. Again, if you look it up in the dictionary, teaching people to obey rules or a code of behavior using rewards and consequences. And then if you look it up in the Bible dictionary, it says punish, guide, or instruct. And so I was going to capitalize instruct, so you get the idea that, they're both, the root word is discipline or disciple, the same word that we get when we talk about being a disciple or discipling somebody. In there is always this idea of teaching or instructing. When we think of disciplining, we oftentimes immediately jump to something harsh or something, that's hard. And while that may be a part of it at times, the root of it will always come back to this idea of teaching. If we want to make disciples of all nations, there's a teaching element to that, right? Where we've got to teach them about the Lord, teach them about the gospel. So what we're going to do is talk about how do we discipline. And so the first couple of things we want to do is do I have one? I think I have the chart up here. Yeah, so we have a couple of charts, and I put them in your handouts as well. So this is just a chart that we like because, again, oftentimes as parents, we can have a wrong view or understanding of what we mean when we talk about discipline. And so when you contrast discipline to the word punishment, and again, I would follow that up by saying it's not even that punishment is necessarily like this bad thing, but in this chart, it helps us push this point that we really are talking about trying to discipline our kids. Discipline is really the thing that we are after. And so when you think about purpose, punishment would be like to inflict a penalty for something. They've done something wrong, we need to penalize them for it. Where discipline is, you're going to train for correction. Like we're still training them, but we're going to train them with the idea that we want to correct and we want them to mature.
Yeah, and then the focus of punishment is their past misdeeds, what you've done, rather than disciplining them for what are you going to do the next time. So there's again, discipline just brings to mind there is just a big teaching aspect to discipline.
And then you think about the attitude between the two, right? On the one hand, punishment is more, it often comes, I know it has in my life, when I start getting frustrated, when I allow myself to get to that fifth time asking them to do something and I'm now frustrated, and that comes out in my attitude if I'm trying to do, if I'm thinking punishment versus discipline, where, the attitude that I want to come out there is this idea that, I love them, and the reason I'm doing this is because I love you, and I want the best for you. That whole thing of, coach's job is to get a kid to do what he doesn't want to do. A parent's job is to get a kid to do what he doesn't want to do so that he can become all that God has created him to become.
And you'll hear us say this a lot: I love you too much to let you act like that. And my job is to keep us all safe. And so, when you practice that with meaning, you're leading with, I love you and I care about you. And then the last one, the resulting emotion, the child, when we're punishing without teaching anything, there's a lot of fear and guilt. When we're disciplining, there's security, and there's not a celebration, but an attitude around, if I make a mistake, I know I can go to my folks, because I'll be met with, what are we going to do the next time? What are the consequences that we're facing here?
And then the next one is just a chart that helps us, because we talk at Lake City about wanting to be an authoritative parent. And so where we get that from is, if you think of these 4 quadrants, you can look at the y-axis, the one that goes up and down, is how responsive or how warm, the warmth that you feel as a parent or give as a parent. And then the one that goes, the other way, the x-axis, is more about control, or how strict you are, or how demanding you are, right? And so the idea is, if you're low on the responsiveness side, so there's not a lot of warmth. Sometimes closeness is the other word that we'll use. If you don't have that closeness, then that would be those bottom 2 quadrants. And so if you're in the bottom 2 quadrants, if you're not very responsive, but also you are very controlling, you're very low on control and strictness as well, then that's why you're in that bottom left quadrant, which is uninvolved. If you are not very connected, not very responsive, but you're very demanding, that's where we get that term authoritarian. You'll hear people talk about, I was in a very authoritarian home.
It's the because I said so parenting style.
Yeah. And then if you go above that x-axis, and so you now are in the half where you're the parent, you are being responsive, there is some warmth. And now what happens is, if you don't have a lot of control, but you're very responsive to their needs, then that is a permissive parent, right? Because they don't have a lot of control over what to do. You can do kind of whatever you want to do, and I'm going to be responsive. You speak and I jump. Okay?
Yeah, it's that I'm going to love you and keep you safe, and everything will be okay.
And again, these are big swaths, big broad brushstrokes. Like you can be anywhere in that quadrant, and so it's not like, if you're just barely in there, then you're doing everything wrong. That's not the point. The point is that we want to, what we try to teach towards at Lake City is, we really want to be in that upper right, that authoritative quadrant, where we do have control. Like, we believe that as parents, we are called to exercise, control, in terms of, we are the parent, and we want them to obey, but also we want to be very responsive, and we want to be very connected to our kids. And when we do that, then we end up in that top quadrant. Again, none of this is perfect and clean like this, but it gives you an idea of sort of what we are talking about as we talk about all of these things around discipline.
And I will say, the reason this is so important is, remember last week, what is the biggest influence on how you parent your kids? The way you were parented, right? So if you come from any one of those quadrants, it's pretty clear you might want to go to the opposite quadrant, which isn't always the best. Or you might have a lot of guilt and shame because you're not doing it exactly like your parents did. So those are all just things that I'm real jealous of y'all sometimes, because I wish somebody would have said some of this to me as a young mom, that's the biggest influence on your parenting. And what do we want to do in our family now? We get to decide.
So we're going to do now what we call the 5 C's of discipline. These just 5 things, again, not exhaustive, but these are some of the key pieces that we touch on when we talk about discipline. And so the first C represents childish irresponsibility versus willful defiance. And all we mean by that is that, when our kids when something happens, the first thing we want to try to figure out is, are they being irresponsible, childishly irresponsible, or are they being willfully defiant, right? Because if they're being childishly irresponsible, what do we do as parents? What should we do with parents if they're being irresponsible?
They don't know what to do.
Teach.
Yeah,
We just need
exactly.
to teach, right? We just need to teach them more, right? If they're being willfully defiant, now what do we need to do? Now we need to discipline,
Yeah,
right?
which is-
And so that's why we put it first, because if we're going to talk about discipline, we want to first start with when are we going to discipline? Well, we're going to discipline when there's willful defiance. I always say, Lord, why didn't you let our kids be born with this little red light? And when they're being willfully defiant, the red light goes on, because there are times where you're not sure if they get it. And we always say, if you're not sure, then we err on the side of grace, right? We say, okay, because they'll be willfully defiant another time, so there'll be another time to discipline. But we never want to, if at all possible, like, we don't want to discipline them for defiance if it's actually they just didn't get it. Like, the classic is that, if there's their glass of juice is, on the table and they knock it over and they're little, like, yeah, that's childish irresponsibility. It's okay. Now, if you say, to them, hey, please move your cup to, across, away from the edge because you're about to knock it off, and they ignore you, and now they knock it off. Now that's a different issue. You're dealing with something different. Okay, so that's the first thing: childish irresponsibility versus willful defiance.
And then the next one is, I know this sounds trite, but it is consistency. And you get up every day and say, didn't we just do this yesterday? Didn't we just talk about this and train this? And the answer is yes. But they're asking you, do you love me enough to help me, again, be the person I want to be? And a lot of it is also your kids learning how to respond to no. And it's also important for you to know that research proves that intermittent reinforcement is the worst thing you can do, because it continues the behavior. In other words, if you say no, 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 yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, 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 yes, that's just really hard on kids. So if you want to change the rule, that's a whole different thing. But it's hard on kids when we go back and forth, or when mom and dad don't say the same thing. I mean, our kids learned super early that if I said no and they ran to dad, because he might say yes, they would get in big trouble. And he would say, you guys didn't tell me your mom said no. So that was a big, big no-no. But it's just really important that we're consistent in our teaching.
And what she means by intermittent reinforcement is just that idea, when they ask for something and you say, no, not this time, please, no, not this time, please, no, not this time, please. Okay, fine, right? When you do that intermittent, parenting, that really drums in this habit of doing that. And so we say, be consistent, let your no be no, your yes be yes. And it's hard, but I will say this comes back to one of the beauties of One Flesh parenting, is there were lots of times when we weren't sure what the answer should be, and we would say, just a minute, mom and dad need to talk for a second. And then we would get together and we would ask each other, like, what do you think? So that once we did figure it out, then we could come out and say, okay, it's a no, we're not doing that, or it's a yes. And so, do what you can. This sounds, like Kelly said, I know it sounds like duh, but it's so important that you do your best at trying to be consistent in how you discipline your kids.
Yeah, and another easy way, and it kind of falls under rhythm of life, And I don't have this any place in here, but it's something that is just interesting about our family is Friday was Spoil Your Rotten Day at our house. And you got sugar cereal, and we had pizza that night. And if you had your homework done, your chores done, you might get a screen or a movie. And that was in the olden days when everybody didn't have screens all over the place. But what I loved about that is if they go to a birthday party or they get candy at school, I say, great, save it for Spoil Your Rotten Day, because they knew we just weren't going to have sugar like that except on Friday. And then on Friday, my favorite line was, you're responsible for your own stomach. I mean, again, developmentally appropriate. And I
Not the 3-year-old.
no, not the 3-year-old. But I had one kid that said, Mom, can I have anything I want? Every topping on my ice cream sundae? I said, you're responsible for your own stomach. And the kid threw up every bit of topping that he ate. I thought, oh, okay, I got some credibility now about ice cream toppings.
We're not going to use names, but he's one that would have his name mentioned a few times here. But anyhow, so the next one, we're going to keep going, is consequences. And this is one of our favorite ones, but this, in terms of kind of some practical things when it comes to discipline. And this is just coming up with consequences for our kids. And so there's a few different categories of consequences that we would say are important. First one is natural consequences. Big on natural consequences. Anytime you can use a natural consequence, we'd say, let the natural consequence do its thing.
Okay, let me tell this one.
Yeah, tell the lunch.
So the same unknown child, he wouldn't care if I told you, but at our house, no one left the kitchen after dinner until I did, and that meant the whole kitchen cleaned and all the lunches lined up, ready to go in backpacks. I drew the line at, I'm not putting them in your backpacks for you, okay? So this one particular child kept forgetting his lunch, and the school would call and say, Miss Pritchard, we got to give him a lunch. You're gonna have to buy him lunch. I said, absolutely not. Do not feed him. He will not starve between now and 3 o'clock, where his lunch is waiting for him. And they thought I was I was really nice, but I said, please don't feed him. Because he was a good kid. You know, they loved him at school. And so he would come home and eat his lunch. And that would happen maybe 1 or 2 more times. And he would forget his lunch, and his teacher would say, Kayla, I got to call your home. He said, please do not call my house. I'll get in much more trouble if you call my house and try to get me food. I'll just eat it when I get home.
So while we're at it, the same kid. One year, I was speaking at a Young Life camp. It was one of those 3-day weekends, and we were looking forward to, the whole family was going to go, because our kids kind of grew up around Young Life camp, so they had the run of the camp, and it's a great time. But we had been reading the book Prince Caspian, and our plan was to go as a family to see Prince Caspian, which, when you have 8 kids, you don't go to movies all the time. I mean, it's a lot.
It's our grocery budget for the week.
So it was a big deal, and but that rule about Fridays was in place, so the movie was only if you had all your stuff done. Well, this child had some homework that he had to do, and Kelly was great about like prepping them before the weekend, like, hey, make sure you get everything done. And so she knew he had this homework to get done. So hey, you might want to do it on the way down to the camp, because it's like a 5-hour drive. And no, he goofed off and slept. And we got to the camp, and you may want to do it. No, he took off running and just ran the camp the whole weekend, didn't do anything. Got back in the car, heading back home. She goes, you might want to do it. He goes, I know, and slept the whole way home. Got home, pulled out his homework, and realized he had a lot more than he thought he did. And, all of a sudden realized, like, he's not going to get it done. Kelly looks at me like, come on. Like,
It was your thing that we had to go to this week, and that prevented him from getting his
so
homework
remember
done.
that example she said where one of us would be strong or the other one? I was like, no, we said he was not going.
I almost
And-
didn't go to the movie.
Yeah, I had a great time. But as we were walking out, this big tear, rolling down, because he was
12.
12, yeah, and this big tear rolling down his cheek. But again, we would just say that's a natural consequence. And yes, it's hard as a parent, but I would rather he do that than, miss something that is actually important, right?
There's one podcaster that y'all listen to that says it's my joy to give a consequence to a kid that I know will produce righteousness eventually. The next one is creative. I wasn't a big one for if you do this, this is going to happen. Because I could see, again, not your kids, but my kids weighing out, okay, this is worth this consequence, I'm going to do it. So we got creative. We would say things like, you might want to go talk to your youth pastor because maybe we're crazy parents. Maybe what we're asking of you is just completely unrealistic. Or we might have you, I didn't tell you this either. Now, do not be impressed by this, but just because this is how God grew us, we also took in about 24 kids along the way of raising these 11 kids. And a couple of these boys were just knuckleheads. All my kids were knuckleheads at one time or another. But they'd done something, and so back then there was cassette tapes, and we made them listen to a cassette tape series and take notes. And so by the time they got done with that, they said, please.
It was
Zig Ziglar.
Zig Ziglar. It was 12 cassette tapes. They had to listen to them and write a little report on each one.
And they begged us to never do that again to them. So I like outside of the box kinds of things.
Yep. And the next one is what we call compounding consequences. And all we mean by that, is so here's the story I tell a different one of our kids.
We have permission to share all this, by the way.
Yes. But he had these 4 kids, 4 buddies that he ran with, and they were always, at our house and eating our food and all of that. And one Saturday they were there.
These were high schoolers.
Yeah, they were high schoolers at this time. And one time they were there on a Saturday, and they'd been. It was one of those where you could see where they'd been by the mess they'd left. They'd been outside, they'd been in the kitchen, and now they were downstairs. Who knows what they were doing? And then, like a herd of elephants are coming up the stairs, and they come to us and come to me, and they right away and they said, "Hey, Dad, we want to go to the Y. Could you give us a ride?" And I said, "I'll tell you what. Give me 30 minutes out in the yard, and clean up that mess you guys made out there, and I'm happy to take you." And one of his buddies said, "How about 15?" I said, "How about 45?" And he's getting ready to talk again, and my son is beating him on the chest going, "No, stop, it just gets worse." And that's compounding consequences. Like we told them, complaining just makes it worse. Not following through with whatever the consequence was makes it worse. The other example I use is, if we ground somebody and then, because we've had parents say, "Well, I can't ground my child because they're horrible to me." We're like, "Oh, no. Being horrible doesn't get you out of, being grounded. It makes it, it lengthens it, right?" That's compounding consequences. And again, parents will say, "Oh, great, so we're gonna escalate this thing every time." But remember, who's the easy one? The kid. It's my son beating his buddy on the chest going, "No, stop. This doesn't get better," right? I mean, they learn this quickly. It's us needing to get out of the habit of, when they start to complain, like, "Oh, okay, fine, whatever."
And then the last one there is child specific. And this is a testimony to really knowing each of your children well. To some kids, getting sent to your room is like Disneyland. They like being alone. They like being able to read their books or take a nap. So this speaks to knowing your children and knowing what's painful for them. To some kids, it doesn't matter if they get to have friends or not. To other kids, it's their lifeblood that it would be horrific for you to say, "Sorry, you can't have that friend come over Friday night." So this speaks to knowing your kids and knowing the currency. We have a family here that has a lot of kids, and they talk about the currency that each of your child loves.
Yeah, which comes back to knowing your child. You want to do it?
And then the next one is complaining. I could not have made it if I had 8 kids, 11 kids, tattling and whining and complaining all the time. Reporting is different. If someone's bleeding to death or it's about a private part, you may always report. But I was always listening and saying, how are you going to work this out, rather than depending on me to settle things. Now, of course, I wasn't going to let them knock each other out boxing, but I just said, are you telling me this to get them in trouble or to help them? And when they would go like this, like, I knew that it was to get them in trouble. So I was quick to teach them how to resolve conflict, because I couldn't have made it resolving all that conflict by myself.
Yeah, and again, that changes depending on their age, but even when they're little, we're talking to them, about this idea of not just simply tattling to get your sibling in trouble, but if there's something that you need to report, then of course we want you to do that. And then we almost changed this to the 4 C's of discipline, but it's 5, and that is, the 5th one is corporal punishment, and we almost just always want to leave this out, except this is one that we get asked about a lot, is what do you do about spanking? And Kelly and I have tried to be really good about staying on top of research. And, when you look at research, there's a lot of research out that just says, to not do it. And I get that. I'm also trying to read between the lines to understand, like, what exactly they're researching. The other thing I would just say is that, you have to deal too with what does God's word say, and how do we frame that, and what does that mean? And we've read some people that have written on this about what exactly the rod is in the Bible, and what does it mean, an actual rod? Does it mean guiding along? And so where we've landed is, because we spanked, so we use spanking as one of our areas of discipline, and so when we teach it, we teach that. But we also say, like, you don't have to spank. One thing that I think maybe helps at least frame this conversation, regardless of kind of where you land, but especially if you land on this area where you're wanting to really wrestle with, do I want to do this, or I think I'm going to do this and I want to better understand it. Just read a really good article, and one of the things that one of the guys was talking about was, 1 Corinthians 4:21 says, "What do you prefer? Shall I come to you with a rod of discipline, or shall I come in love and with a gentle spirit?" So this is Paul talking to the church at Corinth, and the point of this is that he really contrasts these two things, right? This rod of discipline, and then this idea of, should I come and love it with a gentle spirit? And that rod, that's the same word that gets translated, in the Old Testament with the rod, where you hear that about spare the rod, right? And so we're talking about the same rod, and what's important biblically to understand, or one of the things that I would say is important to understand, is, like, if you look at the Septuagint, that verse that has the rod in it is translated, or you'll see it translated from the Septuagint, "Do not refrain from disciplining a child, because if you strike him with a rod, he will surely not die." And so, again, what I want to mostly frame there is this, because when you look at Paul and his contrast, he's contrasting the rod as something that's for something very extreme versus love with a gentle spirit. And so when we say to parents, if a parent says, like, we're planning to use spanking, like, the first thing we say is it should be like the last resort. Like, it should not be the go-to, like, hey, anything that happens, this is what we're going to do. We would say, there's a few things that would be important that we would communicate, like, never do it angry. We always wanted our child to know it was happening. All of my kids, if you ask them, they can all repeat the things that we said, we love you too much to let you act like this, and because you, whatever, with your sister or, whatever, you were defiant with your mom, you're now going to get a spanking. And then they would get the spanking. Again, what I want you to hear mostly is that, we would first and foremost say you do not have to spank. We would also say, if you're wrestling with God's word, it definitely talks about something, and we would say you should consider what it is that it's asking of you, and then again, like I said, if you are of the mindset that we are open to it, or we are planning to, I would just say be very thoughtful with it and intentional with it, because like I said, it should be. I think Paul's contrast is really helpful because it kind of highlights this big contrast, that it's really something extreme. And so for us as parents, we would say like that. And then I would also say, similar to what I said earlier about willful defiance, if we're going to err, we're going to err on the side of grace, right?
Yeah, and I just would say, like, we didn't spank our adoptive kids for sure because we didn't know what they lived through. I know you can't spank foster kids. Somebody told me you can't spank kids if you live on the base. I don't know if that's right, JBLM. It is legal in the state of Washington to spank your kids, which I thought was interesting because they're in the minority of states that is legal. But I would say if abuse is anywhere a part of your past or upbringing, absolutely no, do not spank. All I'm saying is we have to do something that's effective. And there's a whole bunch of stuff out there from rewards, timeout. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I would do. And I would say we did not spank very often. And it was mostly when they were pretty young to get their attention. But it was definitely, I have to help you remember what to do the next time. Which people say, if they hit, you're hitting them for hitting? I said, no, I'm spanking them to help them remember what to do the next time, which not everybody agrees with, which is fine. Because remember, you know your kids, you're the first and best disciplers. And I think I run into very few parents that admit to spanking their kids today. All I know is if you're spanking out of anger or frustration, you just need more help with resources, or we have to talk about your child and making sure that there's not something else going on. So we're begging you to not spank out of anger or frustration, and that you have a good conversation with your partner to make sure that you're on the same page about how you're going to do that.
All right.
7:47? It was just 7:15. Man.
One last section. This is just, kind of our section for parents. We already talked a little bit about this, but just one flesh parenting again, when it comes to disciplining, like Kelly said, you want to be in agreement on this. Whatever it is you're trying to do, like that situation with our son in the Prince Caspian movie. Literally, we stepped behind closed doors to have that conversation because we wanted to agree on how we were going to do that. Go ahead.
The next one is you want to use logic without excusing behavior. And again, this is where the one fleshing comes in. If you're seeing a behavior that you know you have to deal with, and one of you wants to deal with it one way, the other another way, it's just super important that you make a decision about what you're going to do and not confuse a child. It's super confusing when one parent is going to let them do something that you've decided you're not going to let them do. Now, sometimes, again, we all get tired and have those days, which we totally get. But you want to be thinking about, is this behavior if it's because they're tired or hungry or you haven't gotten any sleep, those are times that we need to look at ourselves and our rhythm of life and say, okay, we got to do better. But we still have to fight through that because I get tired and hungry, which doesn't give me the right to be mean to my kids. So that's part of that rhythm too.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little more about that next week with self-control. But and then the next one is keep observing and learning how God parents us. We want to parent our kids, and we want to use God parenting us as the model. But we would also say this is the biggest project, single project you'll take on in your lifetime, right? It is huge. It's 18, 19, 20, 30 years. We always say, parenting, the first 40 years are the hardest. But it is a big project that you're taking on. And so just know, keep observing, keep growing, keep learning, keep asking God, to teach you and to grow you in this area.
And then this is so important again, and I know we went over the chart, but to stay deeply connected to your children as you're disciplining. If you're teaching, even if there has to be a consequence, you just say, I love you so much, and because I love you, this is what's going to happen. And it's hard as parents to see our kids in pain. And I'm not talking about spanking, okay? I'm talking about missing the movie or not getting the ice cream. But when you weigh the stakes as kids 0 to 12, to have them miss a movie versus getting fired from a job because they couldn't get the work done. I mean, those are the things that we're training toward to launch that 18-year-old out the door. So, and you can even say, I love you, and this is really a hard parenting moment for me. But because Daddy and I have decided but that was the other thing. David was really nice to me. He let me tell him the good news. If it was bad news, he would be the one to say, okay, guys, here's what's going to happen now. But it is, there's tension in this because you want your kids to be able to make a mistake and learn and grow. So I've just been reading some stuff where they celebrate people making a bad choice. Now they still have to pay the consequence, but we're learning and growing as we all are along the way. So there's that tension between really staying deeply connected and understanding that connection and making sure the consequence happen are both ways that you gain a lot of credibility with your kids.
And then the last one is just same language. And we probably could just make that say language. There are some phrases that we wanted to be good at. Some of them are in the Sparks, Sparks notes. Some of them are in that. But there are others that we use that, we got really good at, and they've heard us both saying those things, right? Like a couple that we use, some of the ones that we've already said, we love you too much to let you act like that. Like they heard that, they can all, if you call them all now as adults, they all know these phrases and they use them. I mean, that's what's kind of fun when you see them using those phrases with our grandkids now, or try that again, please. You hear that. But we also practice phrases one of the ones that we teach all parents to say is, that's interesting, tell me more. Right? So, and we tell parents that's one of those that, if your kindergartner comes home from kindergarten the first time and, drops the F-bomb, we want the first thing to come out of your mouth to be, well, that's interesting, tell me more, right? Because if you freak out, then he learns this isn't a safe place to bring new words to, right? Because who knows how we got the word? I mean, he didn't look it up in a dictionary. I mean, who knows? And so, we want to do that whenever something out of the ordinary comes. The other one that we use is if it's really serious, we tell parents to practice saying, we love you and we're going to get through this, right? So that's the first thing that comes out of our mouth. So come up with language where you're both saying the same thing, and it's helpful. Number one, because you reinforce each other with your kids, but also in those like that, we love you and we're going to get through this, like that. Unfortunately, we've had to use that, right? I mean, there have been those times where you get that call in the middle of the night that you don't want to get, and you can freak out, or you can have this thing at the ready where you say, we love you and we're going to get through this, right? So we practice those things because as parents, you never know where you're going to need them, and also it allows you to reinforce each other and become even more effective as parents. Okay. Questions?
Comments, corrections? You know, I don't. I mean, I do in a different kind of way, only because I had so many kids, I felt like I could never keep track of who was on the stairs for how long. So I would just say, and this is coming next Wednesday night, we're going to talk about self-regulation and getting control of yourself. So if someone was having a hard time, I would say, I love you so much and I want to be with you, but you need to go get control of yourself. And that usually meant at the bottom step. And I would say, when you feel strong, you come back because I want to be with you. So I let them self-regulate and then decide when they're 2 and 3, sometimes I have to go with them and they come back and they're still going, and I said, oh, you're not quite ready yet, go back. But I didn't send them away. It was usually on the step, and then I try to train them early to know how they're feeling, to pay attention to their tummies, to how they're breathing, to how their heart's beating. And then when they felt calm and strong, then I would have them come back. That's good.
Yeah.
Not related to discipline. We have a hard time doing or like enforcing Sabbath. We have to have a 9 and 4 and a 2-year-old, and Sabbath is really hard. How do you really?
Well, when you say hard enforcing it, what do you mean by that?
We don't practice.
What would you be hoping for on that day?
There's always laundry and things that go around the house and things. So
Okay. Yep. And you're not alone in that. That is hard practice.
I mean, and that really, when we talk about the parenting path, like that's really where we're talking about that rhythm of life, because it comes down to figuring out a rhythm of life so that there was a book 100 years ago, that we read, that it was one of the early books that came out that, about some of the stuff that we're even hearing today. She talked about, what was the last name was Maines.
Karen Blurton
Karen
Mays,
Blurton
Making
Mays.
Sunday Special.
Yeah, and so she talked about, she wasn't so much talking about like how we talk about the Sabbath now, the actual Sabbath and that, but she talked about making Sunday special, because Sunday tended to be, for the Christian, that tends to be, the day that we worship the Lord. And so, but she talked about how to make Sunday special, but she used the Jewish Sabbath to inform us, and to learn from. And so she talked about how, in a Jewish home, they didn't wait till Sunday morning to make Sunday special. They started on Monday. When Monday came, then they would reflect on
Anticipate.
on the weekend. And then when they got to Wednesday, they're now anticipating the coming weekend. And then by Friday, there's some things that they're doing to prepare for Sunday. And so then Saturday is all about getting clothes ready, laundry, all those things. So it's creating a rhythm in your home that prepares you for Sunday, as opposed to like, Sunday's not happening the way we want it to happen. It starts on Monday.
Yeah, and I would say that we like quick wins. So I would think that you would want to start with a pretty quick win. Like on Sunday, if you could have an hour that everybody is calm or thinking about how they want to spend that hour of Sabbath. I don't know if anybody rests on Sunday at your house, but there's a lot of ways that you can get a quick win on that day that will, again, it's baby steps.
Or it could be like, what's one thing on Saturday you could do that would make Sunday better, easier? Whatever that is, and just say, hey, family, look, and that's where family meetings come in. You have a family meeting, you say, hey, first of all, sorry, forgive us. We've not done a good job at this. We want to do better. We want to see Sunday, or see our Sabbath be more special than it is. We don't want it to just be another day, that happens. And so, we thought like one idea, or how old are your kids again?
Yeah, so, or ask them, like, here's, give them a list of like 4 things. Here's 4 things that end up making Sunday really crazy. Pick one that we could do on Saturday that would help Sunday be better. And then, and then say, okay, well, so this Saturday, we're going to get the laundry done. Or whatever it is that might make, so like Kelly said, then you get a quick win, as opposed to like 43 things that you're going to change this week so that, Sunday's better.
Yeah. So good. So good.
Yes.
Another question. So our first, she's 2.5, is entering that I don't want to phase, and I'm finding it hard to validate that emotion, and then the next bit not be just because I said so, kind of thing. So entering that where I'm like logically creating that reasoning in her, but it's like really hard for her to understand at this point. So I'm not quite sure how to navigate.
Yeah. How old is she?
She's 2.5.
Yeah. So this is when we start, talking about feelings. And if you know that she is tired or frustrated or hungry, you say, yeah, I know. It's so hard to get this done when you're feeling hungry or when you're tired. You could say something as simple as that, so we can start talking about feelings, but we got to do it anyway. And that's not because I said so, but we all, even mommy has to do things that I don't always feel like doing. And 2-year-olds are, again, pretty easy to train by act and say, okay, we're going to get your jammies on now, or we're going to jump in the tub. And she might not be happy, and then you just get to say, I'm so sorry that you're sad, but we're going to take your bath now. With happiness, because she's doing what you need her to do, just not happy.
Yes.
How did you deal with if you had to, like, eye rolling or just
How did you deal with eye rolling? I'm repeating it for the
Yeah.
camera. So one thing, and this goes back to, I think we said it earlier, one of the core things that we believe is we're after their heart, right? It's a heart thing. And so they may, God's word talks about like, they worship me with their lips, but not with their hearts, right? And so in a similar fashion, like we want them to know that we're after their heart. And so, first, we model it well with each other. We want them to see us model it well with each other. We want them to see us model it well with them. But then that's where that phrase, you want to try that again, please, comes in. And they hear, because what'll happen is they'll say the right thing, okay, mom, so they said yes, kind of. We say, do you want to try that again? And then, that means we have to have taught them the lesson earlier. Hey, when I say, when I ask you to do something, or when we're communicating, and you cop an attitude, if I say, you want to try that again? What I mean is, that attitude. Like one mom said. I can't remember if she said it was her or her mom. Her phrase was, fix your face.
But our daughter-in-law says, find a different way to respond, which means don't do what you just did, but try it. Because sometimes we have an appeal process that I'd love to talk to you about. If they're characterized by obedience, to allow them to say, Mom, may I ask you a question? And that's coming, but that only comes if they're being obedient, saying, yes, Mom. But that tells you she has a question or has a thought, which I'm happy to hear, as soon as you go do what I'm asking you to do. So that's why it's so important to have them say, yes, Mom, or I'd love to. That's what we eventually started. They came up with, Mom, I think it'd be better if we say, I'd love to do that for you, Mom. And so that's where we ended up in all that training. But she has some thoughts, which, again, are great.
Which is even the question about the 2.5-year-old. She has some thoughts or some feelings, and we acknowledge that, but then we say, and we still need to do this.
It's 8:03, so they need to go get...
Yeah, I don't know. If you have kids, you're welcome to go. We're kind of officially done, but...
Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes.
And write down
So,
any questions.
Yeah, we'll pray us out. But so next week we are doing the third. Not obey you. Next week is self-control. Thank you. Let me tell you right now, I don't think there's going to be a fourth week. Okay, it was supposed to be a parenting panel, but I don't think it's going to happen. Well, that we would, except we're going to be gone. So that's part of why it was sort of I thought I had assembled a different group and
And we might be able to, I mean,
yeah, we might try to get it in a different time and figure out something else. But we've been wanting to get this in for a while, and with us being, we would have done this even sooner, but Lacey came along, and it's been crazy. And Sundays now are and wonderful, but Sundays now don't work because that's why we had to do it on Wednesday.
That's when we used to do these is during Sunday morning, so
Yeah.
it was easy to
So
do.
thanks for coming on a Wednesday night, and yeah, glad you're here. Let me pray. Lord, we love you, and thank you for the privilege of being parents and all that means. God, we are not worthy of you, and we're not worthy to be parents, but Lord, you entrust these kids to us anyways, and we're so grateful for that. And I just pray, Lord, your blessing on every family represented in this room, every child. I pray, Lord, that you would bless these parents as they endeavor to answer the call that you've placed on their life to parent these kids. I pray, Lord, against the enemy that comes to steal, kill, and destroy and wants to wreak havoc in these homes. And I just pray, Lord, in the name of Jesus, no, against that enemy, Lord, having any place in these homes. So God, just thanks for, again, Lord, for who you are and for just the wonderful news, Lord, that we have something bigger than anything that we might face as parents. So we love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.